You can make the most beautiful designs the world has never seen, but if you can't persuade others to agree to it or implement it, those designs will often fall flat and never see the light of day, or at least not the version that you imagined. So when you're going into a design review, this is not just only showcasing and letting people react to it. You want to be able to have an agenda for the items that you want to discuss, whether it is approving certain flows and designs or button styles, or maybe it's just approving a direction, or even just having a conversation about some different concepts. Just know what you're after, know what your end goal is before you go into the meeting, and try to set those expectations so you can steer the conversation towards where you want the meeting to end, because otherwise meetings can go millions of different directions. You might start talking about functionality and this and that. You really just want to have a goal to direct the conversation towards. So that's the first tip, is just have an agenda, have a list of items that you want to accomplish when you are designing and then reviewing that design. Secondly, you always want to present your own work if possible. If you're working on a team, maybe you've got a creative director or other people on the team. Maybe you're working in an agency and there's a creative director that might pitch the work. When you can, it's always going to be best for you to pitch and present your own designs so you can speak to the details, you can speak to the decision-making process, because you know it better than someone else knows it. So if someone takes all of your work and then just runs with it, it's not going to have quite the same effect, unless that is like a corporate level executive. Maybe you're not getting into the design details. It's more about maybe high-level business strategy. But if you're presenting the little details of design and you're trying to talk about colors and border radius and things like that, you're going to want to be the person doing that. And it's often going to be best if you can do that in person and you sit down and you've got a big projector, or you're in a conference room, or somebody sits with you at the computer, or if you're socially distancing and you're doing that remotely, Zoom, Google Hangout, anything where you can share your screen and actually click through and you control the flow of the presentation. I don't like to send over design files and let people take a look at them before I've presented them. I always want to get a chance to present all of the designs and talk through all the designs. And then after the meeting, I'll send a link so people can view the screens and leave feedback, leave more detailed feedback after the fact, after I've walked through them all. So design reviews can often take the shape in 3 different forms. One is going to be an informal. Secondly, you'll have a semi-formal design review. And last but not least, you'll have a very formal design review. So let's take a look at some examples of each one of these. So this was a project called Siempo, where we were working on an actual new operating system for kind of a conceptual phone. And I just wanted to start here because these are the final designs that we ended up on. And I kind of want to talk you through how I presented these designs and how I led the design reviews for this particular project. So I was doing the user experience design and the UI design for this. And first of all, because this was a big conceptual project, I made sure that we did a content map and some wireframes to begin with and some low fidelity designs, just so we could really hammer down on the functionality, figure out what this thing was even going to be before I started jumping into typography and colors and all that. We have this content map that I actually walked through with the client, and we're talking through, okay, there's contacts. You know, I had my first review, I had my first design review walking through this document and just telling them, look, this is the content map, this is everything we've talked about. So I'm trying to organize everything. And I'm also trying to say, okay, we want these actions performed from the home screen. We want to be able to set alarms and do a number of things that are available on the home screen. Some of this other stuff could go in other places. We even have a little section for the hardware, like the different buttons that were going to be on the phone and the functionality that some of those would have inside of them as well. Then I started walking through these. So whenever I'm walking through low fidelity designs, I'll let them know we're not really discussing typography or color. A lot of that stuff is just placeholder. We just want to get the conversation around functionality, like how is this thing going to work? So you can have opinions on design and what it should look like, but right now we're just trying to limit this to functionality talk. So that is just setting the expectation. I know that we want to nail down functionality by the end of the meeting, so we're not going to discuss typography, color, layout, all that stuff. So on these examples, we're just walking through, okay, here's the different keyboard types. You can tap these different keyboard buttons to pull up the different keyboards on this phone. And then we have this input, which is like the main control. And then I'm just walking through screen by screen what would happen here. You tap this. If you activate the input, you can tap something, you can type, you can just walk through all the functionality and kind of get those nods of approval. This is definitely an example where I produced the low fidelity first and then jumped into the UI design. In my opinion, sometimes it can be a little bit easier knowing that the functionality is already designed, and then you can transition into the UI design. So once I had all these wireframes done, then I had another review with them where I actually started working on the actual UI. And I told them, I was like, look, at first I was thinking we wanted this paper feel because we had considered designing this phone with like an electronic ink display, and it almost had like a paper texture, but I know that they decided they wanted to use a regular LED screen. So I thought it could be interesting to explore just a really minimal interface that had just like a simple dark color for like a 2-color layout, one white, one dark, and really nothing else, because that would kind of simulate that electronic ink layout the same way like you might see on a Kindle. So I started exploring some of these, really trying to figure out some good icons. These are some early screens where I'm just kind of exploring and experimenting. Maybe there's like the big functionality pieces are up top and we have some space for down at the bottom. Experimented with some zebra stripes and some colors for the notification, but I felt like that was going away from the original idea of the really calm, muted, kind of paper texture. So I decided to do away completely with the color, but I just wanted to walk through some of these early screens so that you could kind of get an example of some of the things that I went through before I landed on the screens that I landed on. So again, I started liking the solid white and kind of the light gray. Experimented with some two-tone versions, but I felt like that was a little harsh. And then I started kind of refining the colors, working on some light grays, and then ultimately added in some of this like very, very light texture just through like a little bit of noise to kind of create that paper feel. And then I started trying to really nail down the size of the cells and work on refining the icons even more. And then, kind of experimented with some left and right possibilities, but it started to feel a little bit more like something that you would expect in a digital interface, but I wanted to keep things like really, really simple. So I really ended up with just this very simple, big input field that you could tap anywhere to expand and have this list of things down below. And then as you tap into it, you get this activated version that comes all the way up to the top that expands a lot more, just a very clean and simple version. And then once I really kind of locked into this, I started working in this new document and kind of came up with both these color schemes for the light mode and the dark mode. So you can see that started working through some of this, and like as you type, just a really clean and simple, keeping it very focused on exactly what the user wants to do. So that's just an example of how I would literally talk through these documents, kind of show some of the early mistakes, not necessarily mistakes, but just early decisions through the process. And this is informal. I'm talking to one or two other people and I'm leading them along. It's like giving them the fast-tracked version of my design process. Here's what I tried. This is why I didn't think it worked. This is what I moved on to. This is what I was really drawn to. These are the reasons I was drawn to it. This is what I'm doing now. And this is why I think this really works. And the idea is you get them like, okay, yeah, I can see that doesn't work. Yes, I also agree that doesn't work. Oh yeah, I can agree. So you're just trying to buy in these little buy-ins and lead that conversation. And this one was more of an approval process, but I want to show you another one that involves just more of a general direction, kind of walking through one of those exploratory documents before jumping into the actual screen design. So in this example, this is the FiberStream element collage, and this was one of the very first design reviews that I had with the client. We'd already had previous discussions about what if Nike or Adidas was an internet service provider? What would that look like? And kind of have that modern but kind of edgy look, something clean but a little bit punchy and in your face. So that was what we agreed upon before I even started the element collage. So we agreed upon an initial direction. So when I showed him this, I started showing him like, okay, I've got a couple of different elements here. Nothing here is a full-blown website. Everything is just kind of an exploration of what the title bar could look like, maybe some colors, playing around with this avant-garde font, which is actually what the Adidas font is actually created with that. So I thought that could be a fun little addition for the logo. And maybe there's some opportunity to play with some really big numbers. Maybe for the internet packages, we could try this like floating button. I'm not really locked into square buttons versus rounded buttons just yet. I just wanted to experiment with some white headers, some dark headers, and kind of get your feel on what you're drawn to. I kind of have, some opinions about how some of this works, play with some rollover effects, but I'd love to get your opinion on whether or not this is the direction that you feel could work. I'm not sure if this big image works back here. Maybe we'll use more negative space. I'm still exploring some options. I've got a couple of different varieties of headlines and body copy with action condensed and avant-garde. I'm drawn to the avant-garde just because of that kind of bold Adidas kind of feel. And at this point, I'm trying to get feedback on, okay, is the font going to work? And kind of lowering the defense mechanism on the client and just trying to say, like, this is what I'm thinking. Maybe this doesn't work. What do you think? And just trying to get that conversation going. And then by the end of it, it's like, yeah, I really like this. I like this orange. I like this font. I like this color scheme. Well, all of a sudden now I can go on and I can start designing the website. So the next review becomes a little bit more semi-formal. It might not be walking through a big design document of a bunch of scattered pieces, but maybe now it is a screen by screen prototype or flow, or maybe I'm just panning through a lot of screens that are in a design document. It's just a lot more organized. And so the very next review, we've already got the font signed off on. We already like the color scheme, the play with the white and the black. So now I can really focus on like, here's the input for checking your availability. Maybe we use like a really fun, like full black hit state or active focus state. This is kind of like an automatic drop down that would start popping in as you start typing. And just every screen has this really big, bright, rounded button that just drives that action forward. Once something's available, we could bring in this like really kind of powerful graphic that says, okay, this is available, instant activation, and just kind of walking through all of the different types of things that I would explain a little bit more detail about these features and this functionality, but this one in particular, I'm just piggybacking off of the previous design review, and I'm using all that same terminology that we've already agreed to. So there's never really a big reveal necessarily. There might be sometimes, if I've been working really hard on a couple of designs, there is going to be somewhat of a reveal, but I'm always trying to get that conversation going and to restate what we've already agreed on, and just to kind of smooth that whole process all the way through. So that brings me to a very formal presentation. This is really when you have to present to maybe higher level executives. Maybe you've been working with a product manager or the design team, and now you have to present to their managers or maybe their managers. Maybe there's the CFO or the CEO that you have to present to in a big organization. Usually that's going to involve creating a keynote and some type of PowerPoint, keynote, some kind of slide presentation, whatever you prefer. Here's an example of something that I produced for the 12stone.com presentation. This was after months and months and months of work, and now we're presenting to some of the executives. So you can see on the sidebar here, I've got a 64-page keynote document that I made. So I don't need to walk through this whole thing, but this was a really, really big church in the Southeast. And first I'm just saying, okay, here's our design principles. We wanted the website to be predictable and friendly, clean and modular. I will link this stuff down in the lesson, so you can check this out later. But just going through a bunch of design principles, trying to reiterate, these are the things that we had in mind when we were designing. Here are, some of the website. I should probably play this so you can see kind of the transition. So I had like a fun little like transition between the different screens so we could show this floating tile effect and some of the illustrations in the background. So this is page 14 of 60 something. So just a really big document, pausing for questions, but a very formal type of presentation. Down here in the bottom, we had a big discussion about what kind of typeface we wanted to use. Their old brand guidelines used Brandon Grotesque, which is a nice font, but it didn't really have that friendly feel that they were going for. So I created 2 sets of comps for almost, not every page, but a lot of them, so you could see the difference between Gibson, which was this kind of a grotesque, kind of a friendly sans serif that we wanted to use, and then Brandon Grotesque, which could have worked, but it had a little bit more of a corporate, cold feel. So a lot of different comparisons between those two. Here's Gibson, here's Brandon. When there's a formal meeting with higher level executives or a bigger team, it's really going to be beneficial for you to have a plan going in. Don't just go in there with your design files and start clicking stuff around. Like, come up with a plan, fill everything out, come up with a plan, design a presentation if you need to, and walk through it slowly and methodically. And maybe you even have a dry run with a peer of yours before, just so you can kind of get loosened up and figure out what things work and what things don't. Sometimes it can be good to just have that kind of dry run and talk about what you're going to walk through with maybe the internal team members. And then for that formal meeting, then really go through and just hit all those points. Don't forget that the higher up you go in an organization, the more they're going to be concerned with business strategy and user experience and design principles, less about button radius, kerning, letter spacing. All of those things are important in some of those design-centric meetings, but as you go higher and higher up, presenting-wise, unless the CEO is really into kerning, probably best to just avoid the fact that you changed, some of the typography settings. And remember that revisions can be a good thing. If you're walking through your document with an informal kind of process, one of the things that I like to do is I will actually get in here and I will actually make a little comment, make it red or whatever color you want, and I'll do something like this. And then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go ahead and rotate this like 5 degrees or 10 degrees or something like that. And then as people give me feedback or I'm talking through things, I'm like, okay, maybe we should try animating, try reversing the colors, and I will leave myself notes like this during a kind of informal design review, just to kind of, make it easy for me to let them know that I'm hearing what they're saying, but also to give myself something to go on when I get ready to do a round of revisions. And a lot of times, like, the revisions are going to make it better a lot of times. And if they don't, then you should at least show that you tried the revision and show them, like, here's what we discussed, here's what I tried. You asked me to put the name of the module inside the box, and I tried that. Try name inside box. Maybe this is like the revision review after you tried it, but let them know, like, look, I tried the name inside the box. And it looks okay, but to me, the ones that have the icon by themselves, it really just kind of feels a little bit more powerful. Like, you just have this big singular image, this big singular icon, lots of negative space, and it's all about that imagery in there. And then down below we have the headline, and it's a little bit more scalable if we have a longer headline. So if I had typography is awesome and this is a long title, then that's not actually going to fit inside this color block. So this particular layout becomes a lot more flexible. So that might be just an example of when you got some feedback and you incorporated it, but you make sure you keep this and you show whoever asked about it and you tell them that you tried it and here's the reason why it didn't work. And you don't have to be mean about it. You can be nice and say, look, it was a good idea. I think this looks pretty nice, but here are the reasons why I think this is better. What do you think? So it's all about communication, whether you're talking to the developer or leading the design review. But don't be afraid of trying revisions and working them in and having opinions about it too. Go ahead and do the revision, but then try the version that you think is better, and then try to build a case for presenting why you think that's better. So no actual design homework for this lesson, but at the very least, you can use this lesson and bookmark it, reference it when you get ready to do your design review. Think back to some of these tips and tricks that can help you prepare for your design review that's coming up. And if you feel up for it, maybe you record yourself giving a design review of some of of your homework, and maybe you use Loom or something and post it to Slack, and get some feedback from other people in the group about how your design review went. Have them ask questions about it. Try to get in that routine of building a case for certain design decisions and being able to walk someone through your process with an outcome in mind, and show them the designs that didn't work, show them the reasons and the decisions that you got to those nice and final designs if you're in that informal setting. And remember, if you're informal, that's a different story. You're gonna have to get a lot more logistical about it, a lot more planned out, and have a very polished presentation. So use this as a bookmark reference for you, and best of luck on your next design presentation.